Focus Otter family, what's up? Michael Yendo back again. Today we're going to go ahead and talk about how we can take this form built with Chakra UI and translate that into something that looks a little bit like this. Here is our contact form that we're going to be creating today. It's actually all done with Amplify's UI components, and I want to go ahead and showcase just how easy we can take these really cool templates from Chakra UI and translate them over to Amplify so that they can be more cohesive with your project and having a full Amplify stack. If that all sounds good to you, let's go ahead and dive in. Like I was saying, we're going to go ahead and take this form and create this. One thing to note is that this is a responsive form. So when we move things into tablet or even mobile view, you can see that the layout completely shifts from a row design to a column design. Our application is actually going to do the same thing. I'm in Safari, so I'm going to go to responsive. Help me out, Safari. And we're on something like an iPhone 8. We get that same experience. In fact, iPhone 8 Plus, and then I think once we get larger than that, we'll switch things over to a row design. Now, to accomplish this, we're going to take advantage of this UI component library available from Amplify. So I'm going to get out of this view and then head over to my terminal and get our project set up. First things first, I'm going to create a new React application. I'm going to use Next.js, but feel free to use Create React App if that's your thing. So create next app. Perfect. I'm going to hit enter there, and then it's going to go ahead and ask me if I want to proceed. Yes, I do. And it's going to do its thing. Once this gets done, I'm going to go ahead and change into the directory. That was fast. Chakra, the Amplify form, and then open this up in VS Code. I'm going to open it up side by side so that localhost is running already. And I'll have that on the left-hand side, and then we can start coding on the right. Now I have it in a mobile layout first design because we're going to start with mobile and then build up to our full computer size web page. Now I'm going to kick things off by installing a few dependencies. The first one is going to be Amplify. So I will say npm I, and it's going to be at AWS Amplify /UI React, just like that. Now from here, I can go ahead and close my terminal. And let's go ahead and start clearing out some of the defaults that come with a Next.js application, just so we have a good starting point with our CSS. So over in the globals.css file, I'm actually going to go ahead and get rid of this and replace it with a nice background color. That's really all I want for my global styles. Now I'm picking this blue that you can see here on the left as my background color, but feel free to go ahead and hover over this and pick whatever color you like. Hitting save there, I can go ahead and close out. And now let's focus on our application. I'm going to go ahead and bring in the Amplify provider. So we'll say import from AWS Amplify. I'm going to wrap my component inside of that. And that's pretty much all we have to do in this file once we bring in the CSS as well. All right, so I just got that taken care of, and then there is the CSS file that you want to bring in addition. And there we go. Now I have over here the final state of the application running on the left-hand side. Let's go ahead and start the application so that we get a fresh slate. Okay, now this isn't going to look all that great because we still have some Next.js stuff inside of here. So let's go ahead and close our terminal, and we'll head over into index.js. Now the cool thing from here is we can start removing a lot of this code. In fact, let's just take everything inside of this return statement and get rid of it. And what we'll do is we'll kick things off with a flex container. Now this is going to be our first experience with some of the components that these component library provides to us. But it's going to be super, super cool. So I'm going to hit enter here. Just going to get rid of all of that. I'm just left with my background. And then I'm just going to add in some reasonable defaults. Now I want our card and our component to be centered perfectly in the screen. So there's the running joke of how to use center stuff, but in Flexbox it's actually not that difficult. I'm just going to say center on the x-axis, and then on the y-axis, I'll say align, I believe it's items. Set that equal to center as well. And you can see I'm getting some pretty good IntelliSense here. In addition, I'll set the height to be 100 VH. If you're not familiar with VH units, 100 VH is the viewport height. It's basically saying take any available space that there is, aside from any margins or padding. So we have that set up, but we don't actually have anything. Under the hood, this flex container is really just a div with a display flex applied to it. So let's start adding our card. Now that we have our card component inside of here, let's go ahead and apply some styling and see just what happens here. So I'm going to add in a couple properties here. I want the variation to be elevated. We'll take a look at that in just a moment. We're going to apply some border radius and a border color. Now, I'm importing this tokens property to take advantage of this. So let's go ahead and bring in our tokens from our theme. So up here, I'll go ahead and bring in the theme, and I'll say import use theme from Amplify. And then down below, now I have access to all of the tokens that are part of the base styles. So I'll say tokens, and that's coming from use theme. So from here, if I hit save, you can see I get this card component. Nothing too fancy, super, super small. If we zoom in, you can see, well, it is elevated. It's kind of sitting on top of the page. It just doesn't have any content inside of it. Let's go ahead and fix that. The first part of our form, if we're looking at the application over here, we have this card that we just created. Great. We have a nice blue, and that's coming from our tokens. But we also want to go ahead and add in contact information and subfields as well. Inside of this card component, I'm going to add in a heading element and then also text as well. So we'll paste that right in there. And you can see that I'm also taking advantage of these tokens. So I'm not importing these. So let me backspace and see if it provides it for me. There's heading, backspace T, and then there is text. I was like, okay, we're getting somewhere. Now we have a heading, we have subfields, and if you want, you can go to colors, dot, and then get access to all of the available colors. And you can pick the corresponding brightness that you want to apply to it. There's 40. Doesn't look all that great, so I'll switch it back. Let's go ahead and keep going here. We have the, looks like it's an icon. And it's a little tricky of what they're doing in Chakra, but they're technically buttons, right? So we can go ahead and create this same thing. And because all these buttons are within the same area, we'll go ahead and put them inside of a button group. So right underneath our text area, I'm going to go ahead and create a button group right there underneath it. And inside of here, I can go ahead and first and foremost paste in my buttons. So I have button group being imported. Great. Let's go ahead and bring in our first button just like that. Inside of here, we can go ahead and say, well, it's going to have an icon, but let's first put in a phone number just to see what it looks like. And it's like, all right, there's a basic button, right? If I hover over it, we get the effects that we need. If I click on it, it changes colors. But let's go ahead and style it a little bit more to our liking. I'm just going to add in some default colors. And the cool thing about the button group is that it automatically applies flex to all of its children. So right inside of here, I'll say I want the color to be this neutral. Go ahead and take all the content and shift it to the front of the button. And then we're also going to add a gap. And you'll see why we add that gap in just a moment here. So perfect. There's our button. It's looking pretty good. But we also want to add in an icon. Because you can see over on the Chakra side, we have this phone icon. So let's go ahead and bring that in as well. Now adding icons actually is pretty straightforward. We just want to go ahead and first bring in the icon. And if you're wondering where these are coming from, Amplify automatically bundles in Material UI icons. So whatever icons you see over there, you have access to them over here. So there's our phone icon. Now how do we actually use it? Here's the icon phone component, and I'm going to apply the color to be this blue. Once I hit save, you can see it shows up just like that. Now, what's up with this gap? If I remove that and head over to my application, what you'll see is that they end up getting really, really close to one another, just like so. So by having a gap there, we can give it a little bit of space so it's not so crunched together. All right, now we can go ahead and add in our other buttons, and I'm just going to paste those in and bring in the relevant icons since it's pretty much going to be the same as what we have right here. All right, I went ahead and I pasted those in. As you can see, we're really just bringing in the same thing, just swapping out the exact icons that we're using. So all the same styles, and if you wanted to wrap this into a smarter component, you can absolutely do that. But what I'm noticing is that when I hit save, my buttons are in a row. So we should probably fix that. Remember that a button group is nothing more than a flex container. So we can go ahead and switch the direction to column, and then we'll make all of these buttons link items. So then that way they don't have some of this default button styling. All right, so I pasted those in. Again, the direction is column, the variation is going to be link, and then I added in a little bit of margin bottom. But one thing I'm noticing is that the button group is super close to the text content that we have above. So let's go ahead and fix that just by wrapping our top layer inside of a couple of components here. Now to get the effect that I want, I'm going to wrap this in a flex container. And this part is actually going to come underneath both of these areas. So there's our button group. We'll put the flex right there. And now they're back to living side by side, which isn't what we want. So let's go ahead and switch that. So with this flex component, we can apply some styling right inside of here. And note what I'm saying here. I'm saying, hey, I want the direction on base. Base means mobile devices. I want the direction on that to be column, so stack them. But when you get to larger screens, make it a row. So using this object syntax, we can have really easy and intuitive responsive design. Same thing, I want to justify the content on large screens to be center, but in any case, go ahead and separate these two fields with this extra large spacing. So if I hit save here, I get a pretty good desired effect, but now my contact and my fill out the form area, they're not together anymore, and I really want to keep them right in there. So what I'm going to do is wrap this in a view, and a view is pretty much a regular div right underneath both of them. So that way they're treated as one single item. Now I should probably import that. There we go. And then perfect. They're looking pretty good. The last thing I'll do is probably adjust the margin. So for that, I can hop back into just regular style attributes and just say I want the margin bottom to be small. Just so I have a little bit more breathing room. So far, we're looking pretty good. If we check back on Chakra, we have pretty much this part done. And we're ready to move on to our next section. Now, if we look at how Chakra UI is doing it, they have social media icons listed right here with Facebook, GitHub, and Discord. I'm going to go ahead and plug my own stuff. So I'll have Twitter, YouTube, and then probably my blog. But I still need social icons, and Material UI doesn't provide those. Fortunately, the Amplify component library gives us the ability to use third-party icons within our project. So to do that, I'm going to install React icons as a dependency within this. So I'll do npm I react icons. And with that installed, I can go ahead and import those into my project. All right, so I have those taken care of. The three that I'm going to be using, Twitter, Journal, and then YouTube. So then I can switch back over to my project, and down below, I can bring in my very first icon, and it's going to look pretty much just like this, where I have a link component. Again, this is provided by Amplify. So there's my UI React. And then I have an href, a color, a font size, but then the really important part is this part right here. I have my icon. This is coming from our primitives as well. Go ahead and make sure that's imported. And I'm taking advantage of this import, this BS Twitter icon, by wrapping it. Once I hit save, you can see it shows up right there within my application. Pretty cool. Now I'm going to repeat this for the other two, YouTube and the blog, and then we'll kind of see what happens once we get them all in place. All right, so I have those icons listed here. And what do we have here? We have links, fonts, and colors all associated. They're showing up right over here, looking great. And when I resize the screen, let's just kind of see where our application is at. That breakpoint kicks in, and then we have, we have all of our icons sticking to the bottom here, but that isn't really the effect that I'm going for. Okay, so they're living on their own, and when I resize the screen, it looks like they're outside of our flex container. So let's go ahead and change that. We'll grab these right here, and I'm just gonna move them up one. Okay, perfect. That's actually what I was looking for, where everything is still in a column. The problem is that these are being treated individually, and I want them to be in their own sort of group. So similar to before, I'm going to wrap this in its own flex component. That way they're treated as one group. And let's kind of see what that looks like. I'm going to highlight this and hit Command P to bring up my toolbar. And if I go over to wrap with abbreviation and type in flex, it'll wrap it for me. So when I hit save, perfect. That's looking pretty good. The one thing I'm noticing is that it isn't really, because these are links and these are buttons, I guess they're aligned. It just doesn't look like it visually until you're highlighting. So I'm going to move this over just a little bit here with some margin left. All right, I like that a little bit better. And you can play around with the margins to make sure that they suit your needs, but it looks like they're kind of lined up, maybe a little bit off. Maybe I should go medium. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. And then when I resize, yeah, we're getting there. Okay. So the last thing that we really got to focus on is our form. And that's really going to be the last container inside of our card here. So right underneath this, I'm going to have a view. Again, just that sort of div there. And I'm going to apply some default styling to it, just like this. So automatically, we're giving it a base width of 70 viewport units. And then we're going to say, but when you're on a large screen, don't get any bigger than 400 pixels. Background is white. We're going to give it some padding so that way our content has some breathing room, and then a border radius to make the edges nice and round. When I switch this, we're getting a fairly decent layout here, but there's nothing in it. Let's go ahead and change that. Now I want all the items inside of here to be column based. So as I create this, I'll make it a flex container just like that. But I'll say, instead of this being a div, I'll say as form, like so. And then the direction, since it defaults to row, is going to be column. And now we can start adding in our content. I'm going to paste in the first one so that way we can talk about it, but then I will go ahead and paste in the others. That way at that point, it'll make a little bit more sense. So here is our text field. We can go ahead and make sure that that is imported. And then we have some default properties, and these probably look familiar because they come straight from HTML, where we can say something is required. We can give the label a name. You'll see what that looks like when we do that. We're going to give this form item a name that'll come in handy when we submit the form. But then there's also placeholders. The one cool thing is that we have a inner start component property we can work with. And this will go ahead and give us the ability, make sure it's imported here, to have an icon sit within our input area. So I'm also going to make sure that these are imported as well. And once I hit save, you can see that's what we end up with. We have our label automatically set, our icon, placeholder text, etc. So that's what's happening there. Let me go ahead and bring in the other field items. That way we have sort of the whole form ready for us. All right, so I got those imported here. And again, we're following that same mentality where we have the label, the name. Note that the type here is set to email, and that'll give us a nice validation from the browser. But then we also have an icon email. Make sure that that is brought in. There we go. And then for the text field, just by specifying is multi-line, well, that'll go ahead and give us the ability to have a text area. The one thing I don't have is a button, so let's paste that in just like so. And there we are. It's a little close to the top. Let's go ahead and add in some margin here. So I'm just going to wrap this in a view. And then from here, I can control the margin a little bit. So we'll say style equals margin top and give it a medium spacing. All right, so our mobile view is actually looking pretty good. There's a little spacing issue I'm seeing right here where there's just this big area and not so much up here. We'll fix that in just a second. And let's see what happens when we resize. It looks like this isn't switch into a row, and then this needs to be on the left-hand side. Now that's more than likely just a layout issue that we can adjust probably right at the top. So let me switch this back up, go back up to the top, and then we can see what we need to add here. Now nothing too crazy that I can see right at the moment, but it looks like with this view specifically, which is going to take care of these top 3 elements, we could probably wrap that inside of a flex component as well. So I'm going to take a flex component, just like that, and then we'll set the direction to be column and even out the spacing a little bit. All right, so once we set that to a column and give it a space between, and again, this is pretty much all of this intermediary content with the icons all the way up to the contact area. You'll notice that I had to wrap that. Then we're looking a little bit better, and in fact, if I resize this, perfect. Well, not quite, but better. So this is respecting the fact that it needs to always be in this column layout. Now we really just got to bump this over to the right-hand side. And it looks like what's probably happening is that since the flex isn't being respected, it's probably living outside of the flex container. So here is our flex area. I'm going to take this entire view and we'll just bump it up 1 so that way it lives inside of the flex container itself. And let's see what happens when we resize. Okay, perfect. I think that's a pretty good layout and a pretty good representation of what we had here in Chakra UI. So from here, let's go ahead and make sure that this is a true working form component. And the way to do that is over on my form itself, let's squeeze this over here. Right on my form, did I scroll too far? Yes, I did. We'll throw in an on submit. There's on submit, we'll call it handle submit. And then it'll be our job to create this function above. So I'm going to scroll all the way to the top. Underneath use theme, we'll go ahead and define this function. Okay, there we go. Nothing too crazy. Right now, I'm just logging out working whenever the form is submitted. Testing this out, there's 2 ways that we want to make sure are working. When a user hits enter here, so if they hit enter without anything, it'll say fill out this field because it's required. If I type in some text, we get working down here at the bottom. And then if I hit send message, it doesn't look like we are getting working. So what that tells me is that the button is living outside of the form because that event isn't bubbling up. And I'm sure I just have a mistake living somewhere down here. And it looks like there it is. This flex is working on just this area. And this is pretty much my entire form. So I want this to live much further down. So I'm going to take this and we'll just kind of keep bumping it down here. So that way it is right after our button container, just like that. So hitting enter from there, now if I hit send message, it's asking us to fill out the form, which is great. It's recognizing that the email is part of the form. So I'll say focusotter@test.com. And then for the message, we'll just say, hey, and we should be able to get working. Perfect. And still, if I hit enter, we get it as well. Now, how do we actually get these values here? Well, remember we've added on these name attributes. So if I scroll back up, I can come up to here and I can say also name, email, and message. Those correspond to the name attributes that I gave onto each input element. And now when I hit enter, I get working and then I get the 3 items here. Perfect. And now I have this fully complete, fully responsive contact form that you can use in any of your applications. All right, so we went ahead and got that done. I hope you liked the tutorial. I do have a GitHub repo in case you want to go ahead and check that out. But if you found it informative, if you liked it, definitely let me know down in the comments, like the video, share it. You guys know the drill. All that stuff helps. My name is Michael Liendo. Thank you, Focus Otters. Let me know what you'd like to see next time, and I'll definitely catch you all later.